Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bridging the Gap. Make sure to leave a like on this video down below and subscribe. My name is Alvin. I lean right on most issues, and I'll be representing the Republican side.
My name is Luke. I lean left on most issues, and I'll be representing the Democratic side. Hey guys, so in this video, Alvin and I will be giving you our bipartisan analysis on the core seven swing states. So these are going to be the seven states to really watch going into this 2024 presidential election.
Yeah, we've been talking about these states for a very long time now, which way they might vote, and we're going to reiterate that in one of our final videos this election cycle before we begin our predictions, our official final predictions, because this is what's going to win the presidency for either candidate. I've marked out the states that both candidates are going to win in almost all certainty, probably 80 to 90% chances that all these states marked out goes the way I've marked them. And if it doesn't, then the night's already over for one of the candidates. Otherwise, these seven are the states that we don't know which way
Hmm.
they're going to go, and whichever one gets the 270 is going to win the White House.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how do you want to start this? Is there any like preference? Should we just like start with the more solid states and then go from there?
Yeah,
Like
I
I
think
don't
we
know.
should start with Michigan. I
Hmm.
think Michigan is the state that I am most confident is going to go to either candidate. And it's going to be Harris. I don't think that Kamala Harris wins the election if she loses Michigan. If she loses Michigan, that probably means that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are lost
Yeah.
number two. And in that case, it would be very, very difficult, although still possible for her to win the election. And the reason I say all that is because Michigan is fundamentally the bluest out of all of the swing states.
Hmm.
It has voted for Democrats at the biggest margin. For example, 2020 and 2022. If 2020 it voted for Biden by almost 3 points, a lot more than every other swing state except Nevada, where it was close to that. But at the same time, you have to realize Michigan did the same thing in 2016. For example, in 2016, it
Hmm.
was slimmest margin of victory for Trump across the nation. Do you want to start talking about the specifics of Michigan?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay. So Michigan, something else we should note about Michigan is, in 2022, this is a place where Democrats did really well. It like, 2022 was expected to be a red wave across the nation. There was arguably a little blue wave in Michigan in 2022, with the Democrats basically taking the state's like statewide offices by double digits. Um, yeah, if you can go to the 22 map, yeah, Gretchen Whitmer won by 10 and a half points, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, the Democrats have a very like effective apparatus at like getting out the vote in Michigan, and especially with those 2022 midterms and like the ballot referendums there, like they pass lots of legislation to help increase voter turnout in like African American areas and such. So yeah, that's kind of like the state of play, and like I would say the Democrats have a really healthy operation in Michigan. So yeah, I would say of the swing states, this is probably the most certain of the seven to go one way or the other. Another factor I think we should mention about Michigan is the Arab vote. Like it has a sizable Muslim population in Michigan. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So I've marked out right here the 3% Asian population in Michigan. This is largely Arab Americans counted under this. Some Arabs are also counted as white and some as other. So it's a little difficult because, for example, North Africans are generally counted as white and they're going to be Arab. So it's difficult to tell who's where, but yes, it has very significant Muslim population out of all these swing states. The biggest population is in Michigan, maybe out of the country even. I'm not sure, but a lot of Arabs there, and a big issue of contention is the conflict in the Middle East, the war in Gaza with Israel, and how the Biden-Harris administration has been supporting Israel relentlessly. And there was significant backlash, and there's still going to be some backlash, but I think now that Harris is at the top of the ticket, it's going to be smaller.
I mean, personally, I mean, yeah, the backlash in terms of that, it might not be as much as it was with Biden. But also, I think it's important to note that the Middle Eastern, like North African vote in Michigan is already shifting right. Even in like the blue wave in 2022, it did like while the entire state blasted to the left, they went to the right. Still, in like those particular communities. I don't know. They like alone, they might not have much of an impact on the election, but again, in these swing states, every vote counts, so you never know. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up the state overall.
Yep, definitely the state with the most likelihood of voting for Harris, reflected in most metrics. Let's move on. I want to probably talk about Arizona next, just because of how it's been polling. It's been consistently the most Trump friendly state in the polling averages. Trump is up, maybe not anymore now. Georgia's at the helm, but in the past, very, very healthy polling for Trump, even among reputable pollsters like New York Times, Siena, etc.
Hmm.
Left-leaning and right-leaning polls alike have him up, and that translates to a very healthy margin in the polling. The state was pretty decent in terms of the polling in 2020, as you can see here on the state. Biden up 2.2. He ended up winning the state by a very small margin, under a point. And so the polling isn't terrible in Arizona, unlike future states that we're going to talk about, Wisconsin. But the state has been trending left in recent elections, 2016 to 2020, for example. It was one of the somewhat unexpected victories for Biden, but a good one that he definitely could have used. So I don't know how Arizona's going to vote this cycle. It's been trending to the left, but the polls show that it's the most right-leaning state out of the swing states right now. If you look on Polymarket, it's tied with Georgia as the most right-leaning state, almost
Mm.
three-fourths chance to vote for Trump, which definitely is inflated by the Elon Bros flooding the site, unfortunately. But even before he started pumping the site, Arizona was one of the most right-leaning, with Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I do like, yeah, I definitely think Arizona has been moving left generally. But yeah, like as we've seen with the recent polling, it is not looking as good as it did, say, with like 2020 polling and such. Um, Other things to note about Arizona, yeah, that leftward, the leftward shift you mentioned that like generally has been seen over time is concentrated in the suburbs of Tucson and Phoenix. So that's really what's driving the shift left, the growth in those areas. Um, so I mean that on paper would look good for Harris, but I think what's allowing Trump to get where he is in the polling is Arizona's large Hispanic population. I believe, I don't know exactly. It might be like 20 to 30% of the population of Arizona. Feel free to fact check me on that. But it is pretty sizable. Like, obviously, it's in that Sun Belt region. So I do think like shifts in those groups to the right, maybe why we could be seeing some of the negative polling for Harris. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Obviously, Hispanic population is going to be very significant, around 21% here. They're kind of not in the other categories, so that's what it is. Some of the Hispanics are also in the white category, so a little difficult to tell where they are, just like with the Arabs. But yeah, I think if we were to look at it today, based off of most factors, we'd probably both put Arizona, someone like Tilt Republican. For the purpose of the video, we can put it somewhere around there because it looks like Trump would win the state if he's gonna win the presidency.
Sure. And I think how we should approach this is I think only like the most uncertain of the few we should maybe leave blank for this,
That's what
if
I'm saying.
that's all right
Yeah,
with you. Yeah. And yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I think it's fair to put Arizona there for now. Um, okay, I think, and then on that note, I think maybe we should go to what do you think, North Carolina or Georgia?
You know, we could go to either, but I was actually gonna go to Nevada,
Oh,
and
I mean, yeah, that's fair.
because we were already talking about the Hispanic shifts, and maybe you can start talking about the early voting data or something.
Oh yeah. Okay, okay. I got Nevada here. Okay, so Nevada is interesting. So Nevada, it voted by for Biden by a decently healthy margin, 2.4%, which was the second most of the swing states, I believe, only behind Michigan, for Biden in 2020. Um, so on paper, you'd be like, oh, that's pretty good. But relative to the nation, like when you compare like 2016 to 2020, when the nation was shifting left, Nevada didn't move. So that implies that there is some other shifts like to the right going on in Nevada, like under the hood. And that is primarily concentrated in the Las Vegas area. Lots of like Hispanic voters in that very populous area are shifting to the right. So that's kind of been what's like slowly moving the state to the right. And we've seen this in 2022. Although the Democrats won the Senate in 2022 barely, the Republicans managed to flip the governorship in the state by 2 points. So yeah, like I do believe Nevada is going to shift right this election. So there's that. Um, so that's one thing. Then there's the polls. The polling, I would say, has generally looked okay for Harris because even right-wing pollsters have her up slightly. So based on the polling alone, I would say Harris would be favored. But that's not the only data we have. Luckily for us data nerds, Nevada is one of the few states that votes almost entirely by mail and early. It's like something like 80% of their vote is by mail or early. So we could look under the so we could look under the hood and see like party registration for like the mail ballots in the state. And we see currently that Republicans are doing quite well in the state. I believe they have something like a 5% turnout
Yep,
advantage, yeah, as you can
5%.
see here. So yeah, like in the mail-in and early vote combined, Republicans of 40% of these voters are registered as Republicans so far, 35% registered as Democrats. Obviously, these numbers can change. We're still a week away from the election, but right now it looks pretty good for Republicans.
Agreed. And right now, Harris would have to win independents by a pretty healthy margin and clip off some Republicans here, registered Republicans, to win the state right now, just based off of how Republicans are building a firewall. And yeah, you talked about how the state generally stayed the same margin for Democrats while the nation as a whole shifted to the left. So that
Hmm.
means Nevada swung right. And yeah, the state's very working class. And so, with that demographic, working class, service industry is very big there, of course, with Las Vegas and Hispanic population as well being in the Southwest. That is going to be all demographics that Trump's going to improve with. Um, and yeah, I think the state is generally a toss-up, but with that early voting data, it probably Trump has the small advantage here right now.
Yeah, at least for now.
Yeah, we'll be
Um,
seeing it though. It might surprise us. I don't know because just a few weeks back we were talking about how Nevada's probably going for Harris just off the polling data, but with that early vote data, it's kind of convincing us otherwise. But anyways, we
mhm.
can move on to Georgia now.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to go to Georgia?
It's okay. I took Michigan and Arizona back to back, so
Uh,
you can take
okay,
Georgia.
okay. So yeah, Georgia's an interesting one. This was, I believe, the closest margin in 2020. Biden won it by like 0.16 or something. So it was a very razor thin close race in the state of Georgia. Um, oh yeah, it was plus
Yeah,
point
yeah,
0.24. Okay, I don't know where I got the 0.16. 24. Um, but yeah, very close. The thing about Georgia is, yeah, it's been zooming to the left over time. Again, like suburban growth, like the Atlanta suburbs are growing, so they've been moving left. Great turnout operations among Black voters in the Atlanta area. That's what's kind of been driving that shift to the left in Georgia. So yeah, that's I mean, yeah, that's like the main thing with Georgia. But also like but right now when you look at the polling, Trump is actually doing quite decent in the state. He's been doing pretty well in the polls. I think more recently he's been t tied in some polls, but I think generally he's still leading the average. Um, I think that's mainly due to Trump's improvements with black voters in particular. Because I'm not sure on the exact percentage again. I think Georgia's something like 30% African American. Yeah,
yeah,
you could check. Yeah,
thirty-one
yeah. Oh, shoot,
percent.
I'm nailing these. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, so that's but yeah, like that with that chunk of the population shifting to the right, you could see why. Oh yeah, maybe that's causing him to lead in the state. And yeah, like it's seeing as such a narrow margin, even that that small shift, if that shift among black voters outweighs the shift for the Dems in the suburbs, then they're kind of dead. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think Georgia's going to be really close. But yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be again a razor thin margin. Maybe either side could take it by a little over one in a good night, but I don't think it's gonna vote by either candidate by that much. Because yeah, while Democrats have been improving here steadily in Georgia, of course, that surprise victory in 2020, I don't know. Trump's been polling very well. I do happen to believe that that Democrats are going to outperform this polling. Georgia polling is was very accurate in 2020, as you can see, tied on this day in history. But you know, Biden won it by a hair, so very accurate polling here. In general, I tend to believe that Trump is a hair ahead because of how he's led every single poll for the past month, other than one, which was tied. So there hasn't been a single good poll for Harris in the past month from a reputable pollster. And so that's a little hard to overcome. However, you know, especially with good polling in the past. However, you know, Harris can definitely close the gap. You know, there's some
Yeah.
methodology that's a little sketchy here and there with how they're waiting for 2020 response. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about that in our polling video, but yeah,
Hmm.
put that at tilt Republican for now. And now I guess we can talk about North Carolina and then talk about the Rust Belt.
Yes. So going to North Carolina here, I mean, again, I feel like I've been taking, I took the last two. Maybe you should
I
open
can
with North
talk about
Carolina.
yeah,
You should
I can
take, yeah,
open
you
with
should take North Carolina this time. There you
all
go.
right. Yeah. North Carolina has been a state that has been teasing Democrats for a while now. Uh while all the other swing states that we talked about in this video and will talk about in this video voted for Joe Biden in 2020, North Carolina stuck with Donald Trump by 1.3%. And with this election likely being better for Trump than 2020, it'd be very logical for you to believe that North Carolina is going to stick with Trump. And even if Harris won, North Carolina would stick with Trump, you might think. And that's a pretty good line of thinking, except we've been seeing some cracks in the Republican coalition in North Carolina recently. You, of course, had the Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, run for governor against the Democrats, and he is doing abysmally in the polling. He's running behind Trump by 10 plus points because of how he's very controversial. He's sort of a
Mm.
black Nazi. I don't know if that will get us taken down off YouTube by saying that word. But I'm just saying that Mark Robinson is very controversial, and the voters in North Carolina do not like that. And so he is not going to do so very well. But Trump, on the other hand, has seen sort of holding on in North Carolina. In most surveys, he is ahead, although some good pollsters, of course, as we see here, have it tied or Harris up. So it's a little difficult to tell what's going on. You throw it into the aggregate and you realize that, okay, Trump's likely slightly ahead, especially when you see how polls underestimated him in both 2016 and 2020. Although this is a different year, Trump's likely slightly ahead, especially with how North Carolina has voted in the past. However, we really don't know what's going on there. It's one of the states that we thought were sort of the most lean Republican of all the states, of all the swing states, until we recently began thinking there's
Yeah.
cracks there. What do you want to say on this?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Trump associating himself with such a controversial candidate is going to prove to be a mistake. I mean, at least to some extent, I actually happen to believe he's going to do worse there than he did in 2020. So yeah, I feel like it's going to be really close. Um, yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of interesting factors to the state as well because it has a lot of suburban areas that are moving left, like the Research Triangle area. Um, uh, Also in the far western part of the state, Asheville, that area is moving left. Um, but but it also has, again, a sizable African American population, which on paper, of course, it helps Democrats when they turn out, like they're going to vote for Democrats overwhelmingly. But that group is slightly shifting to the right. So again, that might help Trump at the margins there. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure how this will play out. I think this is going to be really close.
Agreed. For now, though, Trump probably holds on North Carolina if he is to win the presidency. Because if he loses North Carolina, it's going to be very difficult for him to win the presidency, especially when this, was sort of his last stance in his last hold. I don't know what you would say there in 2020. But
Hmm.
now that brings Trump to 260 electoral votes, and Harris is still at 241, only capturing Michigan. We've talked about how it sort of just comes down to Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, and we've talked about this at length. Trump does not have a path to the presidency without either state. Harris does, but she would have to win both to take the White House. Otherwise, she would have to compensate with something in the South, which, doesn't look positive for her right now in the South. So we can both agree that the best path for Harris is going to be through Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, clearing the blue wall. And I'll let you take one of them, and then I'll finish off with the rest. So you can choose
Okay,
whatever.
I guess I'll open with PA here.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so Pennsylvania. This is a state Biden won by 1.2. So again, of course, really close. I believe it has the most electoral votes of these swing states at nine of these core seven swing states
Yep.
with 19. Um, yeah, this one's an interesting one. It's a very white working class state. It does have some population centers, with obviously more diversity, with Philadelphia in there. But generally, like vast majority of the population is very white, working class. Um, Among these groups, white voters, particularly in the suburbs, these are very likely to move left, especially in suburban areas. And I think Harris is going to do better in a lot of these suburbs than Biden did. I think the main question for PA is how the rurals are going to move. Personally, I think they're going to be about stagnant and how the cities are going to move, particularly Philadelphia, which, as I mentioned, has that it has more diversity as a sizable constituency of African American voters there. Um, so yeah, it's going to be highly dependent on how that shifts, in my opinion. Right now, I think signs are pretty decent for Harris in Pennsylvania. Um, there seems like I think the polling, like especially district level polling, has been suggesting Harris does have the strength that I suspect she has in those suburban areas. And then a poll of Philadelphia found her doing about this, by the New York Times found her doing about the same as Biden. So I don't know. I think she still has a strong position in the state. Um, what Trump is going to be looking for, though, is I think personally, is him trying to move the rurals and trying to move black voters enough in Philadelphia to favor him. I don't know. That's my
Yeah.
current take.
Yeah, that's sort of the Republican playbook here is to max out the rurals even more than they have been maxed out, generally through turnout. It's going to help Trump that he had an assassination attempt here. That's going to try to, get more of his base to turn out. Move Philadelphia and Pittsburgh to the left using his newfound appeal with minority voters and then try to stop the bleeding with white suburban college educated voters. And for now, I'll put Pennsylvania in the tilt Democrat column just because, all the signs you said, and just because it doesn't get either candidate to 270 really. Because Pennsylvania, we
Yeah,
would probably both agree is the most toss up, very, very, along
very
with
toss up.
Wisconsin, very, very toss up. Just put it there to make sure no one gets the 270. So we'll talk about Wisconsin. And, speaking about all the points you just made about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin is going to be fundamentally uh, more Republican friendly than Pennsylvania because you said all those points about Pennsylvania and Wisconsin sort of has the whiteness of Pennsylvania. In fact, if you look at the demographic charts, it's even whiter than Pennsylvania. It's over here,
Hmm.
83% white, very small black population, unlike Pennsylvania, which has a sizable black population. Wisconsin does not have many major city centers, population centers. It's sort of more rural. Obviously, there's less electoral votes, less people, and a lot of the people are in those rural areas. Even the people in sort of the around the city centers are not necessarily fully Democrat leaning. It's a very white working class state, like we said, even more so than Pennsylvania, and that's going to help Trump. Obviously, you look at the map in 2020 here, it was one of the states that Trump needed, one of the three states that Biden barely won, and if Trump flipped these three, obviously he would be the president for his second term, and so this is going to be a state that Trump has been barnstorming. Of course, Harris is trying to go here to defend the state. She likely selected Tim Walz as her her VP pick to fend off some people in Wisconsin, with obviously being next door in Minnesota. And so we can leave this in the toss column. Obviously, whoever wins the state in this scenario would win the presidency.
Hmm.
We're not really saying any candidate is favored in any of these states except, I guess, Michigan and
Yeah.
maybe Nevada because, recent data. Those states are pretty clear in terms of slight favorites, but most states here are complete toss-ups. And so we should not really, I'm just going to move everything back into toss-up because we don't know what's going on more than anyone else. I think you just
Hmm.
sort of need to look at the data when it comes on election night because no matter what, you're not going to know what's happening until then, unless you're John Rawls in Nevada, which you'll have a fate of 6 electoral votes. So that's it. I mean, in terms of swing
Yeah.
state, I think that's pretty good analysis, but kind of a lot of uncertainty too.
Yes, yes. But yeah, I guess the main takeaway should be on election day, you should be watching these core seven states. If there's any states you should be paying attention to, and you're trying to figure out who the president's going to be, you should look at how they're performing in these core seven, because these will really be the ones deciding the election.
Yeah, I think you're going to want to start with Georgia. I think that's the first state where polls close. Then North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and then the rest of the Rust Belt. And then very late at night, you're going to start. If you're on the East Coast, late at night. If you're on the West Coast, I guess it'll still be evening. If you're in Alaska, I guess it'll be afternoon. But either way,
Hmm.
these Sun Belt states, these southwestern states, Nevada and Arizona, are going to be the last to close. So if it does come down to these two states, oh boy, this country's about to get broken apart again. Watching the returns in Arizona until Saturday, but if that is not the case, you'll quickly see who the president is through the Rust Belt and the Southeast. So make sure to go vote. At this point, all the voter registration deadlines should be up, except for those with same day registration. If you're in a state, you can still go vote there. Um, but yeah, make sure to vote, register to vote if you can still in those same day registration states, and then subscribe for future content. I think our first full prediction is going to be on November 1st, starting with the governorships, and before then, I might release a little more content, but that's the roadmap. Any last words?
Not particularly.
All right. Yeah. Leave a like on this video down below. Subscribe to the channel down below for predictions and ring the bell so you don't miss them. Comment down below who you think is favored to win the presidency and how many of these swing states will win. But that's about it for this video. Share this video with your family and friends. Thanks for watching.
See you guys.